Welcome to the Total Acre Podcast. I'm your host, C.R. Siebold. This podcast is all about helping growers unlock their potential. We aim to bring listeners agronomic insights, valuable educational interviews, real-world strategies that optimize yield and maximize ROI. This show is going to explore innovative practices, creative strategies, and breakthrough products with people that are shaping the industry, all through engaging and inspiring stories. Who better to learn from than the legendary world champion David Hula, Randy Dowdy, and Alex Harrell? Because in farming and in life, iron always sharpens iron. And the best way to grow or get better is to continually be learning, networking with peers, have access to industry leaders, and the tools, tips, and tricks, and overall quality of information. Knowledge is power. Tune in, hit play. Let's unlock your farm's potential together. Hey, Chad Siebold here with Total Acre. We've got one of our guests that's been with us here at Total Acre for quite a few different years. This is actually the fourth year that Josh has been with Total Acre, but we're actually talking to Genesis Ag today. Josh Davis with Genesis, the Vice President. Josh, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Feels like we've done this before. We've been around each other for quite some time, but it's usually in a different capacity, right? It's usually in the fields. It's usually talking to customers. It's usually having fun, maybe digging up trials. When we look at some of the things that we've done over the last few years, I say us, but you really worked as a customer of our trial side of the business, working with Brian Maddox, Bryce, America, and that group. 4 years in, lots and lots of data. When you start looking at what your products are inside of Genesis Ag, maybe talk to us a little bit about what Genesis is and where your company kind of originated. I know it's been around since 14, right? 2014.
Yeah, so 14 is when we founded Genesis. Genesis is kind of the 50% biological company and 50% specialty company. So we've got several biological components depending on what the particular need is. And then we've got other things like phosphites, silica, sea salts, different things along those lines that could be a specific need. And it's not just an off-the-shelf, off-the-rack kind of product.
Well, and see what I love about that too is, you can't be pushed into a corner saying, hey, I'm just a biological company, right? Having different things in the quiver, I guess, so to speak, to be able to actually go out and have a solution for a producer. We were talking earlier about Instago, the product Instago, and I think when you start looking at what Instago is, it's been in our trial program the last 4 years. But when you start looking at the benefits that folks are seeing in terms of reducing use of a traditional fungicide, that's really what Instago is. And it is a biological, correct?
Yeah. So we're more of a biological probiotic. So we're helping the plant's immune system and also the soil work together. We're a heavy mycorrhiza product, so definitely encouraging root health. And also we can create almost like a film on the leaf surface because we have biology on the leaf surface. We just make that more robust, and it's almost like a shield to prevent disease from attacking that. And we can also be a consumer of a non-beneficial pathogen.
Well, and I think that's exactly what I was going to go into, right? You're talking about building soil or building health. And now over a period of time, that's what it's about, right? Building a program that actually can build up that fertility or that soil over a period of time with biology. The other product I think we're working with internally is Carbose, Carbose.
Yes.
It's really a food source for the microbes, and that's really worked well for us the last few years. I think we've had that every time we've ran a trial with Instago, we've always added that food source as well. Why would we do that?
Yeah, we definitely need a food source when we try to add a biological component. And Carbose it could be a standalone because you do have native biology. But when we're putting species out there that we have expectations to do something, we need to have a food source. So I talk about Carbose as being a biological food source and it feeding what we're doing just to make it better. And it can work that way with nutrition, different chemistries, whatever it be, just because we build up the plant, give it more energy. It's like giving a little kid a candy bar.
I love it. And speaking of that, when you were a little kid, back when your dad, Phil, and I think it's cool because you guys have a hell of a story. You talk about what Phil used to do back in the day. And again, I think your background winning NCGA titles back in North Carolina, with Dad. I think that's kind of the relationship that you kind of started with David Hula back in the day. Maybe not you. Maybe you were the little guy chewing on the candy bar in the background, but Dad kind of started that relationship with Hula.
Yeah, my dad goes way back. Had a hog operation as well, so growing feed for the hog operation. Always wanted to grow more dense nutrition and more yield to be able to feed that. So he kind of got to a point that, okay, what do I do next? And universities or agronomists would just say, "Well, put more fertilizer out," and it didn't do anything. So my dad started asking questions. This would have been in the 80s. Well, what about these other elements? And they were like, "Oh no, you'll burn your crop up." And those are things we're applying a lot of pounds of today, like boron or zinc or different things. Well, when he applied those, he saw differences, saw yield benefits. It might not have been tremendous, but it took him up the next step, so to speak. And then I think in the late 90s was when he met David, and the last 25 years, I think, have been a learning experience for both of them.
How cool is that? And I know we had talked earlier too, you know, not to pump your granddaddy's tires, but using something like a 10-10-10. He was one of the first guys that ever grew 100 bushel corn in that area too, back in the 60s.
Yeah, late 50s, early 60s. I can't recall the year exactly, but he was.
How cool is that?
Yeah,
he was the David Hula before David, right? Come on.
Yeah, well, it's when you start thinking that 100 pounds of a 10-10-10 that's going to burn the crop up, and look at what we do today. That's tremendous.
Yeah, it's unreal. It's
from
I just love the background side of what guys were maybe scared to do because of that they were told, and then folks like your granddaddy or even your dad that pushed the envelope to where we are today. That is the reason we are where we're at today in the industry, right? Just keep pushing the envelope. And I think that's a product of what Genesis is today as I look at your product portfolio.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the coinages of Genesis is how can we assist in building that yield threshold? Because if fertilizer was the answer, we'd all be on the front of the magazine. And
right.
We've all tried that. We've all applied too much and seen negatives and so on.
How does that work then, right? Because I think we have hit probably our limitations with NPK, right? And I think that's maybe detrimental to maybe some businesses out in the marketplace, but more is not better, right? But being fully optimized is hard to know, right? We talked earlier about some balance. And if you talk about balance, right, how do you know what to do and where? It takes experience and it takes, trial and error. We've talked about it, right? Like we've all messed up over time. We've either messed up and things have gotten better, or we've learned where things didn't work, right? And I think that being a part of Total Acre, that's kind of what that is. It just so happens the efficacy on most of the products that we've worked with Genesis on has been 70 to 80% efficacy. But it is nice to know where you don't win, right? So where you don't win, you learn as much as where you know that you did win. Maybe talk a little bit about that and how you've been able to evolve some of your products with, working with Total Acre and producers that have maybe helped you along the way.
Yeah, I guess you start looking at efficiency being the big key. We never argue the 1-to-1 on nitrogen, 1.2, if we want to be specific, that any of that's wrong. It's where did you get it from? Well, what we see is we're so inefficient because we don't have premium fertilizer available to us. We see that suppresses biology. So we might put out 200 pounds of X with the expectation of getting this yield, but with the form that we have to use, we may suppress our biology by 15%, and we're not maximizing the efficiency of what we're applying out there. And then also we look at different types of soil tests, looking at what's soluble versus insoluble, and we've got some ranges that we look at for solubility, but that's a good measure for us of, do you need more, or do you just need more activity? Where's that line at? What do you need to do? Because I'll be the first to say, if you dump too much fertilizer out, if your efficiency is not great, a biological piece added to your program is just going to be a waste of money. If you're looking at efficiency and increasing your ROI, I'm a for-profit farmer. I'm not a for-yield farmer. Not to toot my own horn, but I've had one field that I did when corn was $4.50 the last time, made $750. So
there you go.
Why is that not the NCGA? Why is it
the cost per bushel?
Yeah, cost per bushel for sure.
You're onto something. Maybe we should start that, Josh, right? Within Total Acre and Genesis. I think there is something to that. The for profit, right, versus for yield for sure. The other thing I really like about that, just kind of playing off that too, when you start talking about building profitability, you're still talking about building soils, right, over a period of time. And there's an investment that you're making. It isn't just one and done, right? Maybe talk a little bit about the programmatic approach that you like to take. I know I had heard a story about the guy that applied a product for a year and maybe didn't see quite the benefits. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so had a guy candy strap the field one time using one of our products and came back at the end of the year and said, I didn't see anything. I'm done. I'm out. We're like, okay, I'm not going to twist your arm, beat my head against the wall kind of deal. Calls back the end of the next season and he said, hey, where we applied your product last year, it was a significant gain. And I'm like, you didn't buy it this year. And he goes, no, it's where we did it last year. So looking at building biology in soils, and that was a broadcast application, where we look at building soil over time to create those advantages is something we want to look at. Now, the reason I mentioned it was a broadcast application is that was maybe 10 years ago. We looked at, okay, if we've got the in-furrow piece that we could use, we get that colonization on the roots immediately, then we can get a year one success story with yield, along with giving me long-term gain of increasing diversity, relieving soil compaction, increasing water infiltration, making all the things that are limiting in agriculture more easy for that producer.
And I love that story. Do you see that residual effect over a period of time when you start looking at programs you're building for your customers with most of your products?
Yeah. So with the biological pieces, yes. And it's not exponential. It's, it could teeter 7-8 years into it and then start gaining again, because when you balance fertility in biology, and there's a chemical side to it as well, and there are other smaller pieces to the pie, once you start getting that balance, then you've got opportunity to go at a different point of growth. In the short term, we've got to get the biological piece more diverse and more balanced. And within that, we can get short-term gains and then get to a maintenance point from biology.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one of the things that surprised me, and I guess I knew this, but I didn't know this. I was talking to Brian Maddox again. For those that aren't familiar with Total Acre, he kind of runs our trials and works really closely with Josh. But we were talking about Genesis not being crop specific. So we talk a lot about corn and soybeans and wheat within our business. But from my understanding, you're anything international to specialty tree nut fruit. That's impressive, right? So you're able to take some of that same strategic approach with your products and apply them on any product.
Yeah.
Commodity.
As far as the base products that we do, really anything within Genesis, it's looking at how we can impact soil, doesn't matter what the crop is, and also impact symbiotic relationship, provide beneficial host for any crop that's out there. We've got a pretty diverse mix in all of our products to be able to create the plant, host them, increases the root development while we're also remediating soil.
So building that soil, boosting beneficial microbes. We talked a little bit about the fungal side of things too, which is really important. When we start talking about, human health, the environment changes constantly, but being able to actually have a healthy crop longer and creating that balance is really what you're trying to build strategically within that field or that operation, correct?
Yep.
I love it. One thing I got to tell you, though, you got NC State. You're talking about North Carolina, NC State Wolfpack. I mean, they haven't had a basketball team for years. No, I'm just kidding.
They've had a couple decent teams the last few years, but I'm actually a Tar Heel fan. I'm not a State.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's the fighting words, right? Come on now.
Bryce might come after me now.
I guarantee you. I think we're going to see you here in a couple weeks in Omaha. Bryce is definitely going to probably wrestle you for that. When you start looking on the horizon, what's next, right? And the bag of tricks you got in the back pocket. What's next for Genesis? As producers, start looking at, gosh, all these tariffs are out there on all these products that are maybe coming from other countries. Having the facilities there in West Tennessee, American made, right? I think that's cool. But maybe what's on the horizon, if you could divulge.
Well, always seeing things in need, and that's the advantage of my dad and I being out in the fields looking at what are the needs. And we've seen some things the last couple of years that we've made some other products that we are in short-term testing, going out with, that you look and say, why isn't this out there? Now, I don't want to disclose this today until we're ready to really launch it, because my dad's had his ideas stolen for years, and we try to look at that and be conscious of that from now on. But there's still a lot of missing pieces out there, and we don't have all the answers. We're probably not even scratching the surface, but we're seeing things that are providing large benefits, and you scratch your head on, like, what's happening? And I'll
Sure.
tell you the biggest thing with all the information out there, if you look at human health, if you start looking at how can I improve my human health, and then ask yourself, why am I not doing this to my crop? Or vice versa. If you're doing something to your crop and say, would I do this to myself? That I'll at least say that much. That can give some guys that are into medical, that listen to different things. I listen to a lot of Gary Brecka. You listen to what they're saying and you're like, well, should I do that on my farm?
Sure.
Or you listen to some of these hotshot consultants saying, put this fungicide out 7 times and you won't get a disease. Well, would I take an antibiotic 7 months out of the year?
And I can't understand some of the things that I love the concept, right? When you start looking at human health, what would we do to our crop? I think, when you start talking about what's on the horizon, I mean, there is a product that I think that we started to work with you on. I don't know if we can talk about the experimental side of things, but it's more the stubble digestion or digestion tool. I know that we put some out last year, I believe, and we've seen some different results. Maybe talk a little bit about, I think it's Exodus is the name of the product.
Yeah. So we started working with that in 2020. We kind of did our own deal for a couple years. We made it for sale on a limited basis in 2023, and it's kind of full commercial. And we started putting it in trials with you guys last spring. The product is meant to go in the fall, but we still got a ton of residue in the spring. The reason I wanted to do the spring is, let's say we planted soybeans in the corn stubble. Can we eliminate the corn stubble by the end of the soybean crop? Because where we farmed at, and again, my dad had done things for years on this farm, is we were 100% no-till, we cover cropped, but our stubble would be gone within 9 months.
Wow.
100%. I've seen guys that their corn crop 3 years ago is still in the field.
Yeah, and that build up over time. As you're talking about pulling implements through the field, they're just chugging along, burning diesel versus where you've got that residue kind of nice and mellow.
Yeah.
That as a trial partner is helpful for us internally to be able to see those kind of things. But if you have that crystal ball as you're looking out of the horizon, products like this or others, building beneficial microbial activity in that dirt, healthier soil over a period of time. If you look at the ROI on that, sometimes it's hard to measure year one. It sounds like really working hard to be able to actually talk about how we can build year one results and then residual over a period of time.
Correct.
Long game. When you talk about products and services and supporting your customers, what's the one thing that you want to leave somebody that maybe doesn't know a lot about Genesis but wants to start to either kind of dip their toe, or what's the one thing you want to leave with?
Yeah, I mean, as far as a product to leave with, I would say Carbos is the easiest, simplest thing to do. Apply it every time you go across the field. It's low cost, low use rate. Understanding that you have biology in your soil naturally. I think some guys kind of aren't in tune with that because we've been on a fertilizer kick for so long. Now we have biological products that we can add So I think the need is there to add those, but we do have native biology. And that would be the one coinage I would say that guys could be more conscious of is look at the pros and cons of what your operation is doing to your soil and soil biology. Are we working the ground 3 or 4 times? Look at how much carbon we're releasing. How many sides are we applying? And those are necessary, but how are we applying those and what methodology? And also, how much salt are we putting out there every season for theoretical growth?
Yeah, makes sense. Carbose.
Yeah.
Carbose.
Yeah.
So again, I guess that's the one thing you want to leave them with. But for the folks that, again, as I look outside, we're looking at corn that's V3 right now. They're already planted. Soybeans are just coming up. So it looks like for the guys that maybe have a program, maybe this fall, looking at that Exodus product for a digester, still in season, right? For the folks that are looking for a fungicide, I'm going to go back and talk a little bit about Instago. I know we talked earlier about it, but we've seen some really good results in looking at Instago versus a traditional fungicide that folks are normally used to seeing in the fields, but replacing that with Instago. Is that something that folks can still get a hold of this year? And then how do they do that?
Yes, they can still get a hold of it. They can get it on our website. If it's a Total Acre customer, they've got a sheet on YMS that they can look at. It's got my contact on it. They can call and ask questions. But we've got a lot of stuff on our website, YouTube channel. We'll constantly have things on our social media outlets. But definitely looking at, and not saying the need for a synthetic might not be there. But what our approach is with this is how can we build soil biology? How can we build plant health? Because we're a probiotic, and give us a better opportunity for success. Because I think I said this earlier, about 2017, we did some studies where applying a side would suppress your total diversity by 8 to 12%. Let's just say 10% for an average. Some of those plots were up to 15% suppression in biology for 7 to 10 days. If we're conscious that biology is the carrier for nutrition into the plant, why would we want to suppress biology if we don't need it? Why would we not look at a probiotic? Then if the necessity does come late season, because there are things that travel with weather, could be environmental, whatever it be, a synthetic antibiotic approach could be necessary. But all of our proactive things that we're trying to do, like keep disease out of the plant, I'm not going to take an antibiotic not to get sick.
Right. It totally makes sense. And you've oversimplified it, but sometimes that's what it takes, right? I mean, it's that easy button that we're looking to understand some of these. It does get complex, right, Josh? And I think you kind of do a really good job of taking some of the complexities out of, applying products. You were talking earlier about there's no reason to put 4 jugs of something in and then just hope for the best, right? Get an understanding of what a product can do, build soil over a period of time. And I think we've seen some really cool stuff with Genesis and some of the products that we've looked at so far, Josh. Josh Davis, the Vice President of Genesis Ag, thanks a lot for making time today. I know you're a busy man, especially this time of year, but it's great having you on, man.
Yep, thanks for having me.
We're going to see you in a couple of weeks in Omaha. We're going to go out and dig some plants, so I'll see you in a couple of weeks, bud.
Sounds good.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in today to this episode of the Total Acre Podcast. Hey, if you enjoyed it, you liked the conversation, be sure to subscribe. You know the drill. Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Go give us a click, give us a like. Until next time, though, keep pushing forward. We hope that you found something unique, something powerful here that might help you unlock your farm's potential. We look forward to seeing you next week. Be safe. Talk more here soon on the next Total Acre Podcast.